very much. We have headsets for the hearing impaired if you need them. Dr. Sarvis, introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recommendations?
Incredibly, we have no presentations or introductions tonight. However, since we do have board elections coming up, we do have a number of candidates who are with us tonight. We have incumbent Kate Parker. We have Lauren Mason. Lauren, where'd you go? There you are. And we have Dean Nevins here with us tonight. And as filing is completed tomorrow, we will get you an update on who has filed for candidates.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Well, we're gearing up for a new school year. Monday, August 23rd is the start date for most of our students. We do have our 2 year-round schools that are already in operation. And we have most of our teachers who will be training with us next week. So new teachers are coming in on Monday. The other teachers are, all of the teachers are in training Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Final preparations on Friday so that we're ready to go the following Monday. This morning we conducted our annual back to school meeting with the media. We shared information with 9 different news sources about student achievement, state test scores, board focus goals, bond measures, teacher layoffs, budget, educational programs, and board elections. Our 2-day meeting with managers, which we do annually each year in preparation for the start of a new school year, is Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So tomorrow morning we'll be meeting with 65 management and confidential employees. We will be focusing on our board focus goals. Our discussion tonight about board focus goals will be important information for tomorrow's meeting. Working on best practices, common instructional strategies, evaluations, common assessments, professional learning communities, and what we do systematically to ensure that no student fails. We continue to monitor our teacher layoffs. This spring we had 60 teachers receiving reduction in force notices for this school year. Some were part-time positions and some layoffs would have been necessary just due to declining enrollments. The good news is that we've been able to rescind many notices because of retirement incentive, resignations, or teachers moving out of the area. We've been able to rescind 25 reduction in force notices, including 1 counselor from the 2008-09 school year, and we've been able to offer 25 temporary contracts to teachers who have been laid off. So they had rights back to a job when we had a temporary position. For example, if someone was going on leave for the year, maybe a teacher going on maternity leave, we knew that teacher was coming back, then we have to hold that position. That becomes a temporary position. We would offer that and have offered that to our teachers who had rights back to the positions. We also reduced the number of administrators by 2 positions as part of spreading the pain across the district. On August 20 at 5:30, Harding School will be holding its grand opening to launch the Harding University Partnership School. That's August 20 at 5:30, and the public is invited to that. Measure Q and Measure R, Measure Q 2010, Measure R 2010 will be on the November ballot. These are bond measures to fund school facilities and repairs. Each bond will require 55% approval rate for passage. We have used the information that you provided in your resolution board, and we've prepared fact sheets on both bond measures, and copies are available at the side table and have been posted on the district's website along with the board-approved resolutions. District's committee has formed and will convey the information on this matter to the public. At this point, the school district cannot conduct a campaign. We can only provide information on why the board put it on the ballot, information about the polling, for example, but we cannot conduct the campaign using district resources. And finally, we just received word that President Obama has signed this evening the $10 billion financial lifeline, we'll see, to schools across the country. The money was projected to provide jobs for some 160,000 educators who would otherwise be laid off. Well, you know, it's certainly last minute, and we'll see how that actually affects us. Eric Smith and I have been taking a look at this, and we'll give you a report at our next meeting as to how this might affect us. My original assumption was that the state would sweep it into their new budget for education. And I'm guessing that that probably will happen, but it will probably be one of those things with strings attached that you may use this for these positions. So that may have a very immediate effect, and we'll be acting on that and bringing more information back to you just as soon as we can. That's it.
And a question, at the last meeting a month ago, there was an issue about Proposition H in class sizes. Was there, did we get a, did we review that, look at it, and have a response as to what the Measure H and I said about, Measure H said about class sizes?
Yes,
In-
actually.
in math, I think it was.
There's a board brief that will be submitted, but if you want the short answer, I went back and reviewed the minutes. The minutes were inconclusive, and then I went back and watched the tape, and the tape's pretty explicit that it said restore, and in the context of restore, it was really talking about Morgan Hart, 9th grade, 20-1 with a not to exceed of 22.
Thank you very much.
You'll see that in the board brief this Friday.
Thank you. Any other questions of Dr. Sarvis? C2, board comments and correspondence. It's been a quiet month. No squirrels, no gophers. It was great. Okay. We'd like to have Dr. Knoll talk about France, but we can't. Okay. C3, announcement of closed sessions. Item B1, student discipline, that's on the agenda later. B2, approval, denial of interdistrict transfer appeals. We had two, 2010/11-36. A motion by Mrs. Parker, second by Dr. Noel, to approve the appeal. It passed 4-0 with one absent. 2010/11-37. A motion by Parker, seconded by Noel, to deny the appeal. It passed 4-0 with one absent. B3, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation. We had an update from our counsel. B4, conference with labor negotiator regarding CSEA. It's item F1 on the agenda. B5, conference with labor negotiator, Santa Barbara Teachers Association. It's item F2 on the agenda. B6, the cashier waivers. Motion by Parker, seconded by Deacon to approve the waivers. It passed 4-0 with one absent. B7, public employment, no report at this time. Under public comments.
We have one public comment this evening. Chris Grant.
Hello, thank you for having me again. No script, no pressured speech. I just wanted to let you know where PEPS has been since the last board meeting. We've had an opportunity to meet several of us with Robin Zawoski, Dr. Hayden, and Sandra Robertson, and I've learned a lot. First of all, to recognize that the proposal that we were reacting to was a bare bones introduction, and we're looking forward to the full proposal as it comes through. And we learned a lot from Dr. Hayden and Sandy Robertson as well, as far as looking at, well, I think we still have some good ideas in the proposal that I sent to you. Realistically, we understand that not everything is going to be ready in the timelines that I gave you. But that we do look forward to having some type of timelines and having some transparency in how the evaluation will be accomplished throughout the year. It's very important to us that we're not just looking at end-of-the-year results, whether they are CST scores or surveys at the end of the year, but really that we're addressing the program throughout the year. See where we are at the beginning, see how those needs have been met throughout the year with the same group of people so that we have a good comparison. and we have good follow-through. This year, we recognize it's going to be a little off than future years because it hasn't had the time to really set up appropriately. But I think we can really make a good foundation going forward. And if we set up those criteria to evaluate the program well, I think you're going to have a really good program. You've got people here who want to help you and be a part of that. Although we do recognize your need for accountability, we don't want to be holding you accountability and banging you up on the wall. We want to be working with you. And we are parents and educators, and we're all in this together. And we want to recognize that and hope that you'll be willing to continue to work with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
That's it. C5, acceptance of donations.
Move to approve with gratitude.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried 4-0 with one absent. D, consent calendar, consent agenda. Any removals? Dr. Noel?
I want to address something to Dr. Sarvis first. I have D7, D8, D9, and D10. I don't want to pull those. What I want to do is ask, if you would, Dr. Sarvis, to see if council has, get their reaction to my concerns that the district is not the contracting party in some of those, depending on the wording in some of those contracts. It says that, you know, there's like a contract between an outside agency and a program.
With the program.
You're down as the signature authority, but it seemed, whether we need to pay attention to that or not, I don't know. I defer to council.
Okay.
That's on
good.
D7, 8, 9, and possibly 10.
Thank
I
you.
would like to pull D3 and D4.
It's well taken.
D3, D4, Dr. Noel, okay. And Mrs. Parker?
No, I just would like a little clarification on that. So D7, D8, D9, and D10, are they to come back on a different agenda?
No.
We're passing them,
I just,
but you,
it's just, it may be, they may be non-problematic legally, they may be problematic, and I trust that Mr. Price will straighten that out.
okay. Well, then I will move to approve the consent agenda minus items D3 and D4.
Second.
I'd like to point out on, I think it's, is it D6, that there's a page, at least in the original document, that does not belong, entitled La Cuesta Continuation High School, so that's being removed from the agenda package. It's on the
Don't know
back
where that
side.
came from.
On the back side is the document. That one page, though, will be removed, okay? I'd just like, again, one comment, and I will approve the motion, but for the first time in the purchase order document, many of them say previous board approval, but no date. And I would always like to see them, when they say previous board approval, I'd like a date attached to it. But this particular one, there's a multitude that don't have a date at previous board approval. Okay? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, we're on to E1, approval of an action item, approval of new job description for Program Director, Child Development.
As the first step in addressing our redevelopment and redesign in child development, we're asking your approval on a new job description for a program director. As you know, we had 2 RIFs. Those are both for administrative positions. There were 2 coordinators responsible for this program. And we'd like to go to a director, which is commensurate with the recommendation on the part of FICMAT. And are you going to present this? Or- Well, maybe I'll present.
I can.
Maybe,
We can all present.
We're all going to chime in on this one.
good. Well, I'd like Robin to go ahead and speak to the need here and what we want this person to do.
Absolutely. And we have talked quite a bit about this when the FCMAT came. And I shouldn't say quite a bit. It was one of the recommendations in there but it kept coming up in the presentation that this type of program, being one of the largest in the state, if not the largest, really deserves at least a director position. And Jerry Fawcett worked with the recommendations in the FCMAT. There were some job descriptions. She also looked at the state. There's a matrix that actually describes the different responsibilities and types of duties that a director at this level should be able to perform, and that's what went into this document.
Why is the descriptive word program on it? Why isn't it just a director for child development?
I believe that's taken language probably from the state and from what FCMAT had. I don't have the FCMAT report in front of me.
I think that
We
is correct.
could-
It comes from the CDE matrix where they have illustrative examples, and it's program director. I mean, you're not locked to going with that, but that's what they took it from.
That's what they call. They have also something that's called a site supervisor that you saw in there, and that's a specific title in the matrix from the state, which is different than what we might think of it as being. So,
If you
That's-
refer to the actual attachment, though, it's program director.
Program
of
director.
Child development.
It just doesn't correspond with our other directors.
It-
there's just
It could be
director.
director.
I mean,
We could,
we created, is this program director the same level as the director of facilities or the director of technology?
no, it is
Actually,
not.
it's lower.
It's lower.
Okay, yeah.
It's lower. And so that might be an important distinction there.
Okay.
There's
Mrs. Parker?
questions about that.
So, well, that is my question, because we don't see, and I wish I'd thought to ask for this beforehand, because you probably don't have it off the top of your head, but where is range 21?
I do have that on the
You
top.
do?
of my head,
It's-
Okay.
yes.
It's the range of an elementary principal.
Okay.
And our
However-
directors are consistent with a junior high principal.
Yes. However, an elementary principal works 215 days. This would work 225 days, although we have a 2-day furlough that's attached to it, so it brings it down to 223 days. And while the salary is at range 21, just like an elementary principal, the overall annual salary would be higher than an elementary principal because of the additional number of days.
Okay. And so when we see that 125 to 140, that's including benefits,
Correct.
obviously. And so
Exactly.
that's really good to know. Thank you.
We had an extensive conversation
Yeah.
about this.
But I do agree with Mr. Herron's concerns. I think it makes some sense to just call it director instead of program director.
I think that's fine.
But in looking through the duties, I didn't have any issues with what was listed. I don't know if other board members did.
Mrs. Deacon?
I would just agree that I was looking to see if there's anything I thought was missing, and I didn't find anything. It's very thorough and very complete. In fact, so much so it may be intimidating to anyone who's going to apply for the position, but nevertheless, I think that kudos are in order for putting this together, because it looks very good. Thank you.
Do we have, is this, a motion?
I'm quite willing to go ahead and move to approve the job description, with the exception that we're changing the name director from program director of child development.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried, 4-0, 1 absent. E2, second reading of adoption of board policies and administrative regulations in the 3000 series.
Or this is a series of regulations and policies that you have seen before. We made a couple of slight modifications to them based on your direction. And Eric Smith, I don't know if you want to speak to them or just handle any questions.
I would prefer just to handle any questions since I don't remember all the corrections we made.
Anyone have any specific questions? Mrs. Parker?
No, it looked like you addressed any, the small issues that we brought up before, so I'd like to go ahead and move that we adopt board policies and administrative regulations in the 3000 series.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, 4-0, 1 absent.
Thank you.
Approval of board action on student discipline case number 09/10-50.
I will move to approve the recommendation of the administrative hearing panel for 1 calendar year expulsion in case 09-1050.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 4-0 with 1 absent. We'll move on to the conference agenda. F1, first reading of Santa Barbara School District's initial proposal to negotiate with California School Employees Association for the 2010-2011 school year.
Consistent with the RADA Act, this is the first reading of our initial proposal to CSEA. Since we're not at the end of the contract, we're actually midstream in CSEA's contract. We're limited to opening 4 articles, wages, benefits, and 2 others. And those are identified here, which would include both hours and leaves where we have interest. So we're asking the board to accept this as first reading, and then we'll bring it back at the next item, since we have to sunshine it twice.
Mrs. Deacon?
There's a real minor typo here, but I'm going to point it out just because this is an important document. In the 3rd bullet item, the 2nd line after the word articles, I think it should be and either one or both, rather than an. Is that right?
Okay, I've got that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any public comments on this? Any questions? Okay. We'll go to F2.
And Eric Smith, our deputy superintendent, will make this presentation as well.
Similarly, we have to do the same with SBTA, our Teachers Association. The articles we'd be opening would be wages, health and welfare benefits, transfer and reassignment policy, and evaluation procedure. And we'll be bringing it back at the next meeting as well.
Any discussion? No? Okay.
Thank you.
F3, request to speak to the Board of Education by Special Education Advisory Council. And we can even give you 10 minutes if you want it.
And we have Kathy Abarca here with us representing the Special Ed Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought I was going to be late. Good evening, board members. Thank you for allowing us this time to speak to you and let you know what we've been doing. A flyer is attached with the dates for the new upcoming SEEK meetings till the end of the year. Please feel free to distribute. I also emailed all of you English and Spanish so you would have them. On August the 3rd, the SEAC attended the first staff meeting at Cleveland Elementary to present Autism in Education, the Importance of Inclusion. All of you got a copy of that, I assume, PowerPoint. This was attended by all the general education staff as well as the new autism classroom teacher, Bethany Formal. We want to thank Dr. Mills for her attendance and Mr. Vale for his continued cooperative efforts in bringing inclusion to Cleveland. On August the 11th, the SEAC will participate in an open house at Cleveland Elementary. We'll have a table and we'll be passing out information about autism from the Autism Society, answering questions about SEAC and about the Santa Barbara School District and its new advisory council. On August 18th at 8:30 a.m., there'll be a presentation to the PTA of Cleveland School on autism. We'll be collaborating with the Autism Society of Santa Barbara under the auspices of their Autism Community Comprehensive Education and Support Service. We expect a really great attendance then. Also, I just confirmed that on August 31st, there'll be the second staff meeting at Cleveland. This is a series of general ed staff meetings that we're going to be doing presentations in, but Brent Elder from the Goleta School District will be coming and doing an actual visual video examples of the way inclusion works in his school. And I think that all the staff will be really excited to see that. We are planning additional inclusion and awareness presentations at many of the Santa Barbara School District schools in alignment with the PTAs. And these are in direct responses to our principals meeting that we attended. Dates of all these presentations will be sent to all of you upon confirmation. So I wanted to share with you an experience that I had when I visited Houston last month. I went to a place called the Briarwood Academy. It's a 270-acre community within the Houston community, and it houses adults with disabilities. The founder began educating her daughter at home 25 years ago when the school district in Houston told her, we don't have anybody who can teach your daughter because she has special needs. She reached out to other parents and started a school in her backyard that's now called the Briarwood Academy. The Brookwood community is funded entirely by tuition and its own micro-businesses. I found it interesting that they have a $12 million a year budget for 215 adults living in their community, medical care as well as just self-sustaining people with disabilities. When I went there, I had lunch in their cafe that you actually have to call for reservations because otherwise you can't get in. And I was served by a person with special needs who attended to taking our order, bringing our food, suggesting desserts. Next door to the cafe was a large gift shop. And in the gift shop was an outside area for plants and sculptures and things. I learned that every single thing in that gift shop was actually made by the people in the Brookwood community. And they have 6 of these gift shops around the Houston area. You can also go online and order stuff from them too, and they're really high quality, beautiful things. Between the cafe, the gift shops, and the horticulture facility, they provide the income for nearly half of that $12 million budget. They take no government funds, and they rely solely on the tuition and these micro businesses to operate. Dressings that are served in the cafe are also sold in the local HGB grocery stores. All the residents of this community must work in one of the micro businesses and are paid for the work, and they take it very seriously. Every day, volunteers from the outside community come into this Briarwood Academy to interact with the adults with disabilities. Conversations are about who won the baseball game for whatever favorite team they had, or who got a new hat, or new swimming trunks, whatever it was. And I left the community filled with a great sense of hope. And that perhaps having an inclusive society in Santa Barbara is not such a big dream after all. Maybe we could just begin by acknowledging that inclusion is a really great place to start. And Deidre Hammond, the senior advocate for the Center for Self-Determination, wrote about inclusion, that inclusion is belonging. It's about being there when the teacher's in a good mood and when he's not. When Polly slapped Molly after the fight they had at recess about the swings, they both got sent to the principal. When Kevin finally got addition with carrying. When Karen accidentally let the mouse go under the teacher's desk and he freaked out totally, even though you'd never thought a man would act like that. When Frank's mother came in as a guest speaker to talk about being a police officer. And when Caden surprised everyone by knowing the answer to that question about outer space. And when Brianna told the class that her brother was killed in Iraq. And when the class picture came out. Inclusion is about being part of a culture of a classroom and all the rich, intangible lessons and learnings that go on there. When fully 90% of the population a student will interact with as an adult are educated in a separate setting, there is no way the minority student may receive an equal education elsewhere, no matter how we might structure it. Tonight I want to tell the board how much the parents of the SEAC are looking forward to collaborating with Dr. Mills and her staff, once she gets one. And in closing, a quote from an author unknown. The seed includes all the possibilities of the tree. The seed will develop these possibilities, however, only if receiving corresponding energies from the sky. Thank you very much. And by the way, just a reminder that Saturday is Autism Beach Day. We would love to see all of you coming out. We have about probably 50 kids now signed up, so it's a great thing, and they'll be taught by the Santa Barbara SEALs to surf. And that's about it for right now. Any questions? Any? Is that who said that?
Happy second 25th
Thank you.
birthday. Yeah.
I intend on having a really, really good time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. F4, preliminary report on district standardized testing and reporting Kathy's test results.
And Dr. Davis Hayden will present this.
Good evening. We actually had some good test results again this year, 2 years in a row. I'm very pleased with that. I'm sure everybody is. So let's go to the first slide. What we see here, if I can remember how to operate this thing, is that we can see the elementary district, the STAR English language results over a 6-year period. And there was a lot of training going on in these couple years, and we didn't see results, but that's because sometimes training takes a few years. And then we saw an upward motion, and a really big one, and a continued upward motion here. So this is how our elementary STAR results for English language arts are looking for this year. Now, this is actual data from the STAR exam. This is not AYP or No Child Left Behind data. That's going to come out in a couple of weeks. August 31st is the public release of it.
Davis,
But this still looks very good.
how similar do you expect that to be?
I expect we're going to see the same thing across the district for No Child Left Behind. We're going to see these upward movements. Some schools, of course, will not have made the movements, but some of the schools have made really great gains, and I expect we'll see that if they're on their AYP reports. Over here is our STAR math, and you can see the same thing here. We finally start making some movement, made some great movement, and almost the same slope here for movement again in the STAR math. So very nice results for the schools.
Dr. Hayden, could you tell us how you compute those numbers?
I take the raw STAR data, and what I do is I use all the inclusion and exclusion rules that No Child Left Behind uses, and I use all the rules concerning a continuous enrollment in the schools. Basically, I have to go through a lot of eliminating of students that would be eliminated from No Child Left Behind data.
That's not my question. I guess I didn't say it clearly
Okay.
enough. It's 41%, 41%, 40.
This is percent proficient.
40.9%, 42. Those are percents what?
Percent proficient on
Okay.
the STAR exam.
And this is for all grades in
In the
How-
grades 2 through 6.
and that's average?
Yes, this is the district
Just a
average.
simple arithmetic average?
It's a count, yeah. It's a count of the number of students that were 4 or 5, which is advanced and advanced proficient.
Okay. I use the public data from the California Department of Education.
Which is not available to you yet. You must have looked at 0809.
Well, I
It-
can go back 6 years. I mean, that's easy.
Oh, yes, you can do all these dates, right.
So I get something quite different, so that's why I'm asking.
Okay. We can compare I can take a look at what you have later on. Okay. And this is the math. This is all the subgroups. You've got the data. I don't think we had to spend a lot of time going through it. But I did notice one thing that I'm going to point out to you, which is quite interesting, is that I compared whether or not we're doing better than the state averages or not. And the green, which is a little hard to see here, is when we're doing better than the state average, and the purple, I guess, is when we're doing worse than the state average. And
Dr.
in-
Hayden, I don't
Yes.
think we have this document, so.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. I'll get that to you. What
so
I
be
noticed.
A little bit more in your detail, and slowly, yeah.
Okay. What I noticed then is that across the board in math, we're doing better than the state averages, but across the board in English language arts, we're not. This is the elementary district. So it sort of speaks to the fact of having a lot of English learners, but then again, even in the English learner category, we're not doing as well as the state averages. So the elementary district seems to be performing better in the math side than in the English language arts side of how we're, and this across all the categories of Latino, white, social economically disadvantaged English learners and students with disabilities. So now do you want to look at that a little longer, or I can go on?
No, go ahead.
Well, I'd
No.
like to point out that one of the things that we look at, in fact, I just went and got my little pointer here, is to see the change over time from 41% up to 52.3%. English learners, 18, 19%, 33%. That's a dramatic change. And sometimes we see variation from year to year. Last year, we got a larger bump for most of our subgroups, and they were at the highest level ever. That doesn't apply to all of our subgroups this year, but to see that change over time is really very dramatic.
Yeah, that reflects this change that we see right here. You can see the math is higher. These are the same scales than the English across the board.
Can I ask?
Yes, Mrs. Deacon.
So are we pretty much tracking statewide gains, though, in terms of that ascending trajectory?
I don't have room in this chart to put that on there, but the statewide gains are also going up. It's really nice that we're going up, yes, but we're almost catching right here. We're almost catching the statewide gains. So yes, it's looking better, but
But everybody else is going up, too?
yes.
Okay.
But, explain that a little better, a little more in more detail.
Well, Brian is, Dr. Sarvis is correct. We have made nice gains across the board over the years. And that, in those first two charts, you saw that, especially the last couple years. So we're trying to catch up with the state in essence. But the state has also been making some nice gains over the last 6 years.
If we're trying to catch up, does that mean we're behind?
We are in English language arts. We're not in math.
Okay.
Well, and we saw in our similar school ranks that even though schools
Yeah,
actually went
yeah.
up, in some cases, the ranks didn't go up.
Yeah.
In some cases, the ranks were actually lower because the state made greater gains.
Well, that was part of my question, that I use the data, the STAR results
Mhm.
was published by the State Department of Education, and I plotted the elementary district for the same 6 years and the state as a whole. And the curves are virtually identical. The slopes are all but identical. So, which suggests that, you know, everybody's making, whatever gains we can make, everybody else is making. Whatever ones we have made, everyone else has been making. Is that consistent with?
That's very
your data?
consistent what I'm saying, yes. Yeah, exactly. This is the junior highs, and you'll notice here that the English language arts is generally higher than the math. And I'm going to go real quick to the next thing. You'll see in English language arts it's all green, and in math it's not. So we have a reversal of success in the two categories. Now, obviously, I'm going to go back a second and just point out, though, the nice gains that we have been very consistent in English language arts, and also very strong gains in math in the junior highs. So they are actually gaining faster than the state, especially in the math area. So that's really nice to see for the junior highs. They've been working really hard. I've noticed here, though, I put down some possible reasons for this. And one is we've been putting a lot of kids into algebra for the math, which lowers the math scale, the scores in the junior high. So that could be a possible reason for the lower math scores. Stronger performance in ELA over multiple years in all subgroups. All the subgroups are doing well in the ELA. And I don't know whether the influx of students from other districts, because we get a lot of influx from students from other districts, whether that is changing this and changing this, I don't know. Those are just possibilities I was trying to think of as to why this reversal occurs for English language arts and math from the elementary district.
Do you have any way of separating out the junior high students coming from our district versus
Yes.
junior high students coming from other districts? The feeder
Absolutely,
districts?
and it's already been suggested by another person that we may look at that data and see if there's any more we can pull out of this. I only noticed that reversal. I mean, I've seen the reversal, but never thought about it so dramatically until I put these charts up and I was looking at them and I went, that's a very interesting reversal of performance between the elementary district and the secondary district.
Because it's obvious it's not the same two groups.
No, it's not. So I bolded these on this chart because of the phenomenal growth that we've seen in English learners in the reading in the last year. This is really dramatic growth for both the English students with disabilities and English learners. Starting out at around 29 and going all the way up to 43.9% proficient. and 13 going up to 39.1. There are possibilities for this one too. Last year we partially implemented Read 180 for the English language arts in the junior highs. It wasn't a full implementation, so I'm kind of going, well, if that had something to do with this, we should expect even more gains, or hope we will see more gains this year. But there's a lot of really strong gains in English language arts in the
What was the
junior
state,
high.
help me see this, what the state did in the same,
Well,
the change of the same years?
this is grades 2 through 12. I must mention that. This is grade 2 through 12, which is not as good as looking at junior highs only. But it makes no difference.
yeah.
We can use this as the baseline. You just use it as the baseline. This is the 0809 scores for percent proficient.
So it's a single year for all the grades. How can, you can't compare that to grade 7 and 8, surely? I mean,
No,
especially in our district, because
I can only use it as a baseline for measuring it, for taking a look, because this score should be similar to this score for all the students. So if we're going above here and below here, it gives me an indication of how we're doing. I agree with you. I don't have the junior high data to do this with, just the junior high data. The state unfortunately doesn't give us a grade level by grade level separation of the data.
Well, you and I are reading entirely different databases then.
I'm looking at data for No Child Left Behind. The STAR data, the raw STAR data that you find on the CDE webpage has none of the inclusion and exclusion rules applied to it. So it will produce quite different results if you're only looking at what the CDE publishes on DataQuest for STAR data.
Well,
I can go into that at a later
time.
time.
Let me ask a further question, because to my knowledge, I think all of these numbers right up to this point, not including this last year, but right up till this point, all of these numbers in this area are identical to the AYP results. Am I correct?
Very close to it. This is the average of the junior highs, because I'm only looking at the junior highs. This is my predictions for
Well,
the junior high for
that is
coming
true.
up. They're probably going to be fairly accurate.
It does remove the
But
high schools.
But this is, once again, you'll never see this in an AYP report, because this is the 4 junior highs, a weighted average of the 4 junior highs. So I don't mind putting it up here. It will probably be very close to what the 4 junior highs weighted average will be.
Well, I guess my point is that if you go back to the elementary level, those numbers were right on. When we got the AYP reports, those numbers were a direct match with the AYP reports. And AYP reports will be out in September, October. It really depends on who's left at the State Department.
We hope
Department of
August
Education.
31st, but you're right. Yeah, you notice that these numbers look different because they're reds and they're greens and they're underlines and so forth. That's because they are the real numbers from AYP for the district, the elementary district. These are my predictions based upon the averages of the schools.
Did we have any shining examples in individual schools?
Yes, we did. Let me finish this and I'll just mention those. So this is the high school. And this is based on the CASE, because the CASE is the determining factor for the high schools for AYP. And you can see here for the high schools, these were pretty strong performances, but they haven't really moved very much over the last 6 years. Whereas in the math, there has been some movement, some decent movement in the math in terms of CASE scores on the math. I say strong because our schools actually have been scoring pretty high compared to other high schools in terms of No Child Left Behind, state ranks, and so forth. The state has been catching up with us, though, and that's why some of our high schools that used to have 10s and 9s in state ranks are starting to drop back to 6s and 7s, because there hasn't been a strong movement up, and the other schools in the state of California are catching up with our high schools, especially in ELA. So that's just one thing to note. And I have, once again, the predictions based on an average of the 3 comprehensive high schools, and this is what I come up with here. in terms of their predictions. And I'm sorry, I guess I should print, I forgot to print these out to give them to you. Yes.
On the previous slide, the right-hand table
This one.
with math, what math courses are those? How are they combined?
This is the Casey.
High school teaches Algebra 1, Algebra
No.
2, Geometry,
No,
Calculus, what is all this?
this is the Casey math test.
This is just the math that's in the Casey.
Exactly.
Uh,
10th
Why
grade.
don't you use the math reported by subject, you know, the STAR reports for math rather than the Casey reports for math?
It gets quite complicated because we have different numbers of students in an algebra class, different number of students in a geometry class, different numbers of students. By the time, I mean, I could do that, but the weighted averages across the 3 different comprehensive high schools would become a fairly long,
So, but
intensive
this-
calculation.
So this is that set of math items that's in the Casey,
Exactly.
which,
It's
if I
what in-
recall correctly, is something like 7th grade algebra?
This is the
But
math.
not even all of 7th grade algebra?
Well, there's 2 things you have to think about here. One is that this is not the math on the Casey for graduating from high school. This is the math on the Casey for proficiency, which is a higher standard than the math for passing to graduate
But
from
it
high
still-
school.
But it still doesn't exceed the 7th grade math standards, if I recall that debate correctly.
Well, it does. There are items that do. I think the important point is that for AYP purposes, for No Child Left Behind, the ruling was to go to this 10th grade and 10th grade only. I mean, this is
Yeah.
only one grade
That's the other
level
point about-
test because of the difficulties in these vertically scaled tests, especially in math and science. So for AYP purposes, we moved away from using the STAR test results. Now, looking at STAR English would work because that would be a continuation of the same procedure that we saw at the elementary and the junior high level. But for AYP, we only look at 10th grade results based on this one test, which is an exit exam. A bulk of the test is lower level material. There are higher level items. They had to add in higher level items. They had to recalibrate the test so that we don't only have the exit exam, you know, what it takes to graduate cut point. We also have a higher proficiency cut point. So what we're doing is staying consistent with AYP here.
Well, I understand that, but it seems to me that we as a board and the public would benefit from a broader picture of mathematics in our high schools than is obtained by only reporting 10th grade scores in 10th grade, and on a subset of the array of mathematics that's taught in our high schools, and going from pre-algebra all the way through AP calculus, that this doesn't tell us anything about that. And it seems to me that we would have a better informed board and a better informed public if we found some other way of reporting this than simply latching on to something that was done for the federal government, which is quite different than something that's done to inform us about our mathematics instruction in our high schools.
Well, the results that you're asking for most of that will be coming out in a couple of weeks, but I'm only giving you a preliminary look at it to give you an
Yeah, but
understanding
I
of.
guess what troubles me is that the public who watch this say, gosh, things are just wonderful, without peeling any of the layers off the onion to see what's going on elsewhere. And, I mean, I would hope that we will have another presentation that will tell the public in greater detail what the performance of our high schools is in mathematics, as well as English language arts, but especially mathematics. It's a more complex picture. One line can't possibly do it.
Well, I would
Okay.
have to disagree with you, Bob Noel, on this one. I think the results do look pretty positive. I know that they're not the full results. Those will be coming later, but in general, these results are looking good.
Yeah, and we'll get more charts and graphs on
Later
many
on.
occasions.
Yes, and the real numbers will actually be coming out in a couple of weeks. This is a preliminary report,
Thank you.
just to give you an idea of how our schools did and where they're going.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Deacon?
And actually, I think that's That's
Mrs. Deacon
it
has a
for-
question?
Actually, I have a favor to ask. On these charts, and I noticed in the Excellence for All graphs as well, the y-axis isn't labeled on the graphs, and I know it probably took all of us just a second to figure out, at least I did, that that was proficiency.
I see.
But it would be really helpful, especially since the public is seeing these as well.
I didn't put it in the title.
No,
I did
well,
not
you
on
might have,
this
but
one.
it involves some extrapolation, and I would just appreciate it if you could just kind of label
Sure. I
what those
did not in this
percentages
case.
reflect.
I usually put it in the title, percent proficient. I missed it on this one.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Do
Ms.
you, were there any standouts?
Well,
in
yes, we have a
preliminary?
couple of schools that look like they really did well. If I was to go to junior highs, La Colina made some really strong advances pretty much across the board. And so did Santa Barbara Junior High. So in the junior highs, we had two schools that really had some, looks like going to be some real strong gains. In the elementary schools, we had three schools that look like they're going to have really strong gains, and that would be Cleveland, Franklin, and McKinley. So those schools, like I say, strong gains across the board pretty much.
I think that we need to call attention to La Cumbre's performance, which in terms of its position in the state of California is quite exceptional. For schools of its demographic, its Latino academic performance index is second only in the state of California to a charter school in Hawthorne, run by Aspire Public Schools, which is a truly exceptional one that has a lot of extra money provided by foundations. So if you take that school out, La Cumbre is the highest performing school for Latinos. I think it was in English language arts, I have to specify that, in the state of California for its demographic. Amazing performance.
Mr. Herron?
Mrs. Parker?
The high schools' STAR scores will be reflected in their API scores that presumably we'll get on August 31st.
Yes.
And so, I mean, this is only one piece of the puzzle, and obviously we get more. But I do appreciate what Dr. Noel was saying about the math in particular, because you do some great charts, Dr. Hayden, a little bit later in the fall usually, that breaks out the math. But we have to do our own research in terms of looking at the STAR scores for things like how ninth grade algebra went, and I think that's fine for us to look at it at the STAR site. But sometimes those API scores can be really misleading because ELA is always so dominant, and it's reflected in the APIs more than the math scores. So.
I agree.
Any other words of wisdom for us?
I just hope a trend continues like this. I was very disappointed the first 3 or 4 years I was here, and then we've started to see these nice trends, and this is looking better.
Good,
So-
thank you.
Well, before you leave the podium, let's be clear about what we do expect, because we do expect the AYP results, the official results. We expect to know whether schools have another ding on program improvement, or they're going into year 3 or year 5 in some cases, or whether they're going to hold. We expect the API reports, which is the state accountability system, and probably the API reports are the best overall indicator for our high schools particularly. We don't expect state ranks or similar school ranks until next April, when those all get recalibrated. I know, as ridiculous as it sounds, we're going to have to wait a while, and there are some data corrections that will go into those as well. Am I missing anything?
No, actually, there are quite a few data corrections we can make. You're absolutely right that the state ranks and the similar school ranks will be very, very late, and that's because they won't give them out until all the data corrections are turned in by all the districts in the state of California. So, yes, you're right.
Well, we will be watching the release dates, and we'll bring you those test results just as quickly as possible. And we will bring you the individual school results. And of course, schools are already taking a look at their data and trying to estimate, what growth they made and what they didn't do.
Are there schools that we need to worry about?
Yes. The raw data I've given to the schools because they need to make placements, they need to make decisions about all sorts of items. And so we release that raw data to the schools as soon as we get it, so they can look it over and like Dr. Sarvis was saying, they're starting to make all sorts of calculations. They're poring over that data and trying to make decisions about students. So
So they have a lot of data we don't have.
I've given them the raw data for each school so they can use it, yes.
Mrs. Parker?
My last comment is that I think I have to thank the state of California, the CDE STAR, and the district, because it was amazing how fast we got the test scores at our homes this year. I've never gotten my children's STAR results in July, and I was very impressed, and it's really nice to have that, particularly before school starts. There have been days or years where I've gotten it after school starts. So this was terrific, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break before we get into discussion of focus goals. Come back at 20 after.
That's where I got
Yeah, Bohard. Okay, we'll get back in session, and we are in F5, discussion of board focus goals.
My favorite subject.
Good. Mr. Herron, board members, we're entering the new year, 2010, 2011, and we have the board focus goals that we've been using, well, actually for about a year and a half at this point. We use these goals as primary measures of our progress. We report on the goals and activities periodically. In fact, this is why we showed you AYP results, because that's what we have tied into our board focus goals. We produce a number of reports that capitalize on the elements of the board focus goals, and I have a list of them here in the cover memo. And we use them in our attendant document on Excellence for All, which describes what we're doing in each of these areas. In fact, as I meet with administrators tomorrow, we'll be launching back into this document. We'll be talking about how well we're doing these things. And the book that we're using, Teach Like a Champion, really makes the case that just like in the medical profession, if you want to save lives, you do the tried and true, you work with your sanitary procedures, you get those down, your tried and true practices, and those are in fact the institutions that get the highest results. And this is not rocket science. If we're all great teachers, all using these same techniques, then we should expect higher gains. Well, you have the board focus goals, and they're shown on the screen.
I would like to point out that actually they were changed at the end of 2009 slightly.
Slightly.
And on page 4 of the Excellence for All are the revised focus goals.
Oh, is this different from the
Yeah.
revision?
Yes.
Oh, okay, very
Yeah,
good.
so that the one on 209, 210 was changed in.
Well, then, let's go to page 4
Go
of
to page
Excellence
4
for
and you'll
All.
see a slight difference.
These goals are defined in 3 different areas, those areas being student achievement, student safety and school climate, and communication. At the forefront are the achievement areas, and there are 4 sub-goals under student achievement. And board, my recommendation would be to stay the course on these. If you want to see these continue to change, you want to see us stay focused on them and see that same upward mobility, I'm recommending that you hold to these goals. If you do make changes, they should be fairly minor. There may be some other areas that you are interested in, but as you've expressed to me, that for the entire organization to operate at a higher level, I believe that that these goals really apply to the overall organization.
comments on that? You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think 1.2 has no accountability, no power. We have multitude of schools that aren't anywhere near 8, and to give those schools an 8 goal is a non-starter. They're not going to make it, and there's no ability for them to make it. If some of them just doubled their possession, or doubled their scores, it would be an achievement. But to say, hey, we want you to have an 8, it's not going to happen, and I don't know, there just doesn't seem to be an effort. How can they do it? Mrs. Parker?
Well, what is your thinking about, instead of having the ultimate goal on the board focus goals, instead of having an incremental goal, which would be along the lines of every school will increase its rank by 1 level or higher, with each student subgroup also achieving an increase in its rank by 1 level or higher, until it reaches what I would say is actually 2 things, which is a state rank goal of a minimum of 5 and a similar school's rank of 8 or higher. And that way, because you're absolutely right, I mean, we just have it out there, and how do you hold somebody accountable if
Yeah.
there are 2 this year?
I was saying something like, if you're under 5, you have a goal of 5.
Mhm.
If you're between 5 and 10, you have a goal of 8. I mean, I don't,
Mhm.
it's,
But I think that it would be unrealistic even in 1 year and these are annual focus goals,
Yeah.
to do anything, to really expect more than 1 level of growth.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it takes to go to more than 1 level,
Mhm.
so. But it just seems to have it as 8 or higher. It's been 8 or higher for a long time, and it hasn't done any good. So,
Well, I beg your pardon.
Okay.
Please, you were right.
Well, first of all, I want to say there's one public comment, and I'm not sure when we wanted to take that. But I have to agree that when you pick a number like 8 that is sky high for some of our schools, I think it loses legitimacy to a certain extent in the sense that people just don't see it as a realistic opportunity, and we want to motivate and provide morale for our staff. I know they're meeting tomorrow to discuss these goals, and it seems to me if we gave them something that was a little, they felt they could legitimately shoot for, that might help them do their jobs better.
Dr. Noel?
I'm the culprit who argued to have this included. The problem is that you can have a relatively high score or scores, but for your demographic really be low. And we have 2 schools in the district that are at the bottom when looked at compared to their demographic. But in their state rank, they tend to be up around 5, don't they? And why is that? Because they have a lot of middle-class, professional class kids in them who, without being challenged, do pretty well, okay? So you run that risk. Now, they include these similar school scores as giving us a tool to say, okay, but for who your kids are, for your demographic, the expectation should be higher. And that's the fundamental logic. Now, I think we started off, did we not, Dr. Sarvis, with a 7
Yes,
as a
we did.
goal? And I think you're the guy who actually suggested we go for 8. And I sat back and said, wow, didn't even have to argue, you know. Maybe 8's too high, maybe 7's too high. I think I certainly concur with Mr. Herron that goals have to be kind of, I think they call them proximal, within reach, to be at all salient in influencing behavior, and maybe some kind of a sliding scale like that. But one has to be careful not to have the net effect of relaxing an expectation.
I guess one of my questions is, if these are lofty goals, that's one thing. Do you have understandings with the various principals that if they go from a 1 to a 3, that's really good for them? And do they understand that that's the goal of 1 to 3, not 1 to 8? I mean, it's not going to happen one day. But if they increase from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, do they feel that that's a success?
I would say absolutely. I mean, any increase, particularly significant, to go from 1 to 3, that's very significant. And so, yes, we do have those conversations.
And they get praised for it, and they get,
Absolutely, and from you as well, when we get, when we have their single plans for student achievement and all.
but do they feel
be
that they
honest-
failed because they didn't get 8?
No, and I was just gonna say, to be honest with you, that goal of 8 doesn't often come into the conversations, and probably for exactly the reason you gave. If you were a 7, then yes.
Mr. Herron?
Mrs. Parker?
But that goes back to me, to making these annual, particularly annual focus goals relevant. And I think that if we include what Dr. Noel was saying and making sure that it's both the statewide rank and the similar schools rank, so that for the schools that he's talking about with the demographics where sometimes they can skate by on their demographics, but it'll show up in the similar schools rank, but have an incremental 1 rank per year if you have not reached that goal, sort of included in the language. I think that would make this focus goal more relevant on an annual basis.
Mrs. Deacon?
I would definitely support that, because I think there's a lot more positive reinforcement when you can make your goal. And if you say they're not even talking about the 8s, then I mean, it's kind of irrelevant for us to have them. So I like the idea of this incremental rank year by year, but keeping the similar schools rank much more in line with the demographics. And I did just have to say that some of our schools, I don't think, I think our students are challenged at our schools. So I don't want to leave the impression that they're skating by in any way, or just by sheer nature of their demographics that they're going to do well, because I do know that our students work hard.
Dr. Noel?
The other aspect of it is that it is entirely outside of the control of our schools, of any given school, as to how its 100 comparables are doing. And they may be, just by the luck of the draw, there may be some real high rising, high flyers in there. The other side of that coin is, it's pretty, I don't think it's in the forefront of most people at our schools' minds is how they're doing with respect to schools outside of our district, if even how they're doing within the district. And that's not a bad thing, to have them have some way of saying, look, it's relevant. Santa Barbara's not an island. It's part of a larger school community, and there are people out there. If you're only scoring a 5. Similar schools, that means there are schools out there that face the same educational challenges that you do, more or less, okay, that are doing vastly better. How about maybe even going to find out what they do? It seems to me that that's a very important part of this. I'm not sure that that message goes through at all, but that's kind of part of the underlying rationale.
I do have to point out that we do have discussions about that, and some schools, Harding in particular, Dos Pueblos, La Cumbre, there are schools and leaders at those schools who go out and visit. They do a lot of that kind of work, and we're actually very highly competitive within the district as well. I mean, they're calling each other all the time when these scores are there. They're shooting each other the raw data and going, I got you there. And I mean, they're very competitive in a very collaborative, supportive way. They want everyone to go up, but they are looking at data outside of our district as well.
Mrs. Parker?
May I just ask that we go ahead and have the public comment on this, because I want to be sure that colors our
Okay.
discussion too.
Gina Perry.
Thank you. I want to say we appreciate the board's current focus on academic achievement and particularly on accelerated learning. In your focus goals for the coming school year, Parents for Excellence in Public Schools ask that you continue to focus on supporting all of our gifted students with appropriate coursework. We also request that you focus on better gifted identification at the elementary level. I know that the district is working on this, and we strongly support that. We'd also like to ask that you continue to oversee the implementation and ongoing evaluation of the new honors program at the secondary level, as the program affects almost 50% of our student population. We're delighted to see the improvement in the district's CST scores and hope it continues. We expect that it will continue. We hope that in continuing to push for academic gains, the board includes the academic needs of gifted students. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I comment
Yes.
on a couple of things I've heard? One is this idea of expecting improvement of 1 point in state ranks, similar school ranks, which I think is a good idea as well, which is fairly similar to an API where you expect API gains to a point. In fact, the state set a goal of 800, which is rather similar to our 8 similar school rank. That's one comment. The other is that where we run into difficulties more often is with the very first one, where we have this federal academic performance target that is just shooting to the sky. And schools, as they fall behind that, have really no hope of achieving that. They are looking for gains. Here, we show the targets when we do the reports, and when we bring reports back to you on AYP, we'll show you those AYP targets. And we're not keeping pace, hardly anyone is keeping pace with those targets. It becomes more unrealistic. Yet, by not making that target, that's where schools are in program improvement and continue in program improvement into the second year, third year. They can hope for safe harbor by making good progress that year with all their subgroups. But that's the one that we run into the greatest difficulty with, in terms of people saying, oh, well, you know, we're not even going to focus on that because we're so far behind, and it's climbing 10 percentage points every year.
Is that going to change possibly?
Well, we expected it to change about a year
Yeah,
ago.
but isn't the new federal program coming up with a different set of standards?
We haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
Well,
Mr. Deacon?
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I think we hear all the time that pretty soon every school in California will be in program improvement. So, you know, maybe that's an unrealistic and a largely more academic and irrelevant goal. I don't know what everyone else thinks about that, but in some ways it does seem out of sync with reality.
Dr. Noel?
So I'd like to go on to other aspects of the focus goals phenomenon, because we do them every year, and I agree we should not change them, modify that, but basically stay with it. But then when we get our reports, there are never any consequences, and I don't know whether you can get any how to design consequences, but I can't help but believe that some kind of consequence for falling too far behind the goals would serve as an incentive, would enhance the incentive of the goals.
Well, right now, Dr. Sarvis was talking about focus goal number 1 and the 4 points under it. And we focused on 1.1 and 1.2. What about 1.3 and 1.4, Dr. Sarvis?
Well, we've been operating based on your direction on 1.3, and you know, we've variously seen data that shows some small movement. We have a long ways to go on this. 1.4, increasing the number of students and underrepresented students who are eligible for admission. We think we have a long way to go on this as well. I mean, we need to maintain focus on both of these, we think.
Okay.
And that's what motivates my comment, as you know. And I'm not saying that, you know, we bring people up and, you know, and flog them for failure of their school to accomplish 1.3 and 1.4. But it seems to me that that we can do better than we are, if nothing else, by the way we handle the information and by the reporting and by calling for, I think one thought that we had in an earlier discussion was interim reports. So it keeps the goal with it very much in people's mind in an operational way, not just kind of a rhetorical way.
Mr. Deacon?
Well, we may, in fact, I don't know if we're going to shorten these or not, or the bullet pointed items, but I actually had one to add. And it has to do with career technical education, because I do think that's something that we care a lot about, and I would not be averse to calling that out under the student achievement focus goal as a 1.5. I have some language here. Let me just read it and get your feedback on it, but it would be strengthen career technical pathways and increase ties with community partners and post-secondary institutions.
Strengthen career technical pathways and
increase ties with community partners and post-secondary institutions.
In or and post-secondary?
And community partners, because there's ROP and other things like that, and post-secondary institutions. I guess I'm feeling the need to really call out career technical, because I do think it's so important, and sometimes I think we talk about it a lot, and I know we try to make progress, and I know the funding's been cut on it, but I would just like to get it back on the radar and elevate it to this level.
well, also in the federal, isn't it career readiness and, yeah, college and career readiness?
And it is, I mean, it's just listed as part of the action plan under the 1.1,
on page
1.2.
9, yeah.
Exactly, right.
Well, I think that I tend to agree with Mr. Deacon that to bring that out as a goal rather than, I don't want to call it an afterthought, but something that is of lower profile. So I go against my statement that I think we should keep them. Oh, well.
Yes, well,
Okay,
Never.
Mrs. Parker?
and I absolutely agree with Mrs. Deacon that that would be a very worthwhile bullet to add, the one bullet to add at this point. Well, I'm going to lie because I have something I want to bring up. I don't know if it should be a bullet, but I would like to talk to you guys about this. For me, though, on 1.3, there is one little thing I would like to add to that line. Every school will significantly increase participation of underrepresented students in advanced courses and AVID. We still need to push more kids into our AVID elective. And I think that would be not difficult or a major change just to add that wording in there.
That would be great leverage.
So after the word courses and AVID?
Yes.
And why don't we spell it out and then put the acronym in parentheses? Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Put AVID in the parentheses?
Mhm.
Did I understand the board correctly that the career technical goal would be a bullet under student achievement?
1.5.
While we're on that,
I'm sorry.
while we're on that first bullet point, because we call these courses and it specifies GATE, and technically our GATE classes are now honors classes, I think maybe we want to think about that. I mean, obviously GATE continues to be a state program. We continue to get funding for that, but it's not a course per se anymore.
No,
correct?
although one of the things that we track is gate identification
Right.
at the elementary level.
Right,
And
right.
we look at participation of underrepresented students.
And I completely agree with all of that. Just the way this one is worded, it says in advanced courses, and I'm thinking these are primarily all secondary.
Well, maybe it should be advanced programs?
That's good. And then we could just leave GATE in there. Great.
How about focus goal number 2, student safety and school climate?
Mr. Herron?
Dr. Noel?
Thank you. Safety is really important, and I don't want to in any way diminish its importance. But to me, it's, you know, just a little bit different than something that goes without saying. I mean, I assume it. But school climate means a lot more than safety. It means school culture, and it has to do with the whole culture. Is for me, the encompassing word. All of the symbols, the meanings that the school tries to convey to students, and it's subtle. It can be subtle. It can be very overt. I've visited some schools where they have consciously designed ritual that intends to reinforce some values and to get kids oriented towards college who come from families where there's no college whatsoever. And I don't get a feel for that in this description. And I'm not, you know, I'm not, it's not meant as a criticism. I would have a hard time writing such a description myself. But it seems to me that the emphasis on safety is almost like a default. Well, what do we mean by safety and climate? Well, we know what we mean by safety, so let's talk about it, but we don't know what we mean really as clearly about how to create a real learning environment. Every one of these words becomes a cliche, doesn't it? You know,
Yeah.
to make it something more than a cliche.
But if you look on page 18 and 19 and 20, I mean, there's a lot of language in there that talks about school climate.
Yeah, I know, and that's, and
So-
my comments, I still leave,
Yeah.
I stand by my comments after having read that. I don't think it's adequate as to reinforce the core mission of the school. I mean, this is all great stuff.
Maybe tomorrow when we're meeting with our principals, we can address that, because I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I agree with you. You could do everything on here and more and not have a school culture that is, you feel it when you walk in the door and it's inviting and kids want to be there.
Engaging.
All kids want to be there.
Well, there may be multiple cultures, because I'm not sure you're going to have one that's going to make all kids want to be there.
Exactly. So,
And that's,
We can-
it seems to me it has to be very carefully thought through. I even jokingly, a couple of years ago, with one of our parents and active people here, her husband's an anthropologist, social anthropologist. I said, maybe we should have you come in and do some participant observation kind of work in our schools. What does it look like from a cultural perspective? What are the predominant values? What's being communicated in terms of meanings in this environment?
Mrs. Parker?
Where I saw a hole in that section was there's a lot of focus on students and activities for students. Some mentions of parents in terms of PTAs and PTOs and site councils, but not so much about including them in the school climate and how that's positive, and teachers. I mean, if teachers are not, and support staff don't feel like they're a tight-knit group and that, you know, they're connected to their school and proud of their school, and it doesn't all mesh, and there will be, you know, pockets of happy students and pockets of content parents, but it's not really a school community. And I think that we see that at some of our school sites where it just hasn't all come together.
May I comment as well?
Yes, Dr. Sarvis.
I think there's a big difference between the foundational issue of a safe and orderly school environment and a learning culture. And I think here we're really responding to the gang violence and some of the community issues. By the way, those statistics are going down. That doesn't mean that, you know, we've solved any problems, but but they look a lot better right now. And when we take a look at schools that have really made great gains, well, for instance, we interviewed Joanne Keynes this last year about the huge increases that La Cumbre made. And Joanne just plugs in program after program, engages students, makes sure they can't fail, makes sure they're successful, and all of those things together become a learning culture, which is very different from them just managing a program and managing students. And I would appreciate seeing us go off in that direction. Now, trying to measure that is another matter altogether, because we see the literature full of talk about a school culture and a learning culture, and the definition of that is really varied, and it will vary school to school.
No, I think I told you about it at a professional meeting of Charter School Association or something. There was a paper on designing school culture. A couple of principals from schools up in the Bay Area, and that's where they talked about the idea of designing the rituals, and I went to one of the campuses, and they kind of walked me through it, and there's symbols, college pennants around. Every kid has already identified with a college or a university, and this is all not by accident. This is because they carefully contrive, if you will, these things for kids to discover them and or lead them into them.
Do you have any suggestions on a focus goal that would lead into what you're talking about as far as background? But you can't, in the board focus goal, include everything. It's got to be a very succinct statement that everything else flows from. So how would you change this one sentence or add to it to lead into what you're talking about?
I'm trying to find the sentence right now.
It's on page 4.
Yeah, I got it over there. Well, I would certainly reverse the order between safety and climate. But I mean, to me, it's a cop-out to say as measured by appropriate student surveys. That's kind of sweeping it all into one easy, cheap and easy methodology, when in fact this is a lot more complicated, and it's going to take a lot more thought than we can give it tonight, and I can give it tonight for sure.
Mrs. Deacon?
Well, I agree that the phrase "by appropriate district surveys" is pretty vague, pretty weak, and I'm not sure that we've really done that. So I'd be fine with even just leaving that off. Maybe we could say something like, all schools will facilitate a positive learning culture and improve student safety. I mean, if we want to continue to keep those together. I don't know if we want to substitute learning culture for school climate. I mean, school climate has a nice feel to it. I think it encompasses some of these extracurricular things that maybe, I don't know if learning culture does or does not. And then just to throw one more monkey wrench in this.
Say that one again, though. Say that again.
That was good.
All schools will facilitate a positive learning culture and improve student safety. I don't know if we want to keep school
Can
climate.
you find a stronger verb than facilitate?
I was trying. I mean, you could say nurture, encourage, I mean, we don't want to make it sound like require, because it's something you have to do kind of organically.
Mrs.
A little too fuzzy.
I guess my suggestion would be to say school culture instead of learning culture, because it's so much more than the academic, and there might be a tendency to do that, but I like all the other language.
And, part of the literature big literature on organizational culture, that I think this is part of that same genre of thinking.
Okay, let's
Be
repeat it one
very
more
aware
time.
of the organizational culture.
Let's repeat it one more time, Mrs. Deacon.
All schools will facilitate a positive school culture and improve student safety.
Okay?
Can I just add
What's
one
your,
more?
yeah, what's your other thing?
One
Yes.
more thought, and I don't know if it belongs here, if we even want to do this, but with the bond measures before us and facilities on our mind, I don't know if we want to add the notion of improving school facilities as a board focus goal. I think it's certainly something we all probably support. I don't know if it needs to be included now, but I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Mrs. Deacon?
Or Mrs. Parker.
Mrs. Parker?
And I'll throw out the other thing that I was thinking of, because I'm not sure if this is, what I'm looking at is what we had put before is in order to support these goals in 0910, the board will, and we came up with a list. And when I reflected on the list later, I realized a lot of this was actually staff work and not board work. I mean, we needed to facilitate it and we needed to talk about it at board meetings, but I felt like that this, the majority of these bullet points down there are not, were not actually the board's job. The one other thing that I've been thinking about is that we have these 3 really important reports and programs that we're in the process of implementing. One is the special education FICMAT recommendations. We now have the child development recommendations, and we have the new honors program and everything that goes with that. And I feel like these belong for this year, for 10-11, these need to be part of our focus goals. But I'm not quite, I don't know if it needs to be bulleted in the same way these first 3 are, if we can have a paragraph at the bottom that is not like numbered, but it says, in addition, during 2010-11, the board will monitor implementation and the refinement and evaluation of these programs, and it may be that would be a good place to put in facilities. And I don't have wording for it at this point. Obviously, we're not making any decisions tonight, but I do feel like that for 10-11, those things need to be up there.
I agree totally, yeah. Mrs. Deacon?
And since all your administrative staff will be together tomorrow talking about this, it would be really helpful to get their input.
Anyone else? Dr. Noel?
To be salient, they have to be short, as is that statement.
Now, how about focus goal 3, communication? It has to be succinct. Is that okay as is? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I know we had trouble when we evaluated how successful we are when it came to looking at these items under, the bulleted items in order to support. A lot of us felt we are responsible for that, so maybe some of those need to be relooked at and maybe eliminated or the wording changed. Mrs. Deacon?
Well, I would be fine with eliminating that bottom piece if, there's many more things that we will do to support all these focus goals, and so calling out things like email links from the district website seems so small.
That was eliminated already.
Okay. Yeah. But it was on the first sheet.
I know.
At any rate, I would support, I think the idea of maybe just getting rid of all of those, calling out those specifics, because anything that we call out then begs the question, what have we forgotten? So maybe, so I would be okay with not specifying those.
Well, speaking for Mrs. Cordero, I'm sure that the very last one is something she's very concerned about. Dr. Noel?
I would go up one more paragraph with Ms. Deacon's action. I think focus goal 3, communication, is basically fluff and back to us and really has no operational significance. Probably overstating that a little bit. Oh. Number 3, I suggest that we eliminate it, that it has very little operational significance.
Although that was, in the FICMAT report, that was huge, but if you're going to include FICMAT as in another category, that might cover it too. But communication in the FICMAT report was, very strong that we need help.
And one of the reasons I hesitate on because I completely see your point, Dr. Noel, But there's, in the action plans, there's actually a lot of important work that's happening and in that area, and it's ongoing. And so I don't want to give any impression that I would want any of the things in the action plan to stop, because communication has been a weakness.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you quit saying it, they stop.
I actually think that should always be a goal, to be honest. I mean, you're always working to improve communication, so I would favor leaving it in.
Have we given you enough ideas that we want to keep this the same, but you can make some tweaks to it and come back with some,
Yes.
ideas? Okay.
That's good direction. In fact, we'll carry this discussion to our administrators and management staff tomorrow.
And I don't know, would you like this to come back at our workshop session again, rather than a meeting?
I think that would be great,
Okay.
but, yeah,
Okay.
soon.
And that's
And
September.
I'm sure Mrs. Cordero would want to be a part of that,
Yeah.
and if she's going to be there too.
I think
so
that's September 3rd.
Yes.
Yeah, September 3rd, okay. Okay, let's go to F6.
Here, let me just make a quick note here so that.
And if you could get that out to us, in advance of that meeting, in a board brief or some other method.
Well, one of the other things that a board member had requested was a discussion of, on student achievement, how we can boost student achievement and how the board can then support those efforts. And a lot of the discussion we just had about board focus goals was about just that. As we go into programs like looking at the test data, the things that we inspect becomes expected. That's very important to us. I've included just one article, and boy, there are hundreds and thousands of articles on student achievement gains. This one happens to be from Jerry Good and Thomas Brophy on what we've really learned about good teaching. And it's not just a list of 35 variables, but you can see somewhere in the page. You can see early on in this article a list of the elements of good instruction. The California Department of Education just came out with some website links to closing the achievement gap, achieving success for all students, and good stories from successful schools. As Dr. Noel pointed out, looking at schools that have made great gains is an important way to compare yourself. Early on, we brought in the Adlai Stevenson High School model, and we saw what they had done simply through looking at data and opening communication so that they talk about data and how to make the changes they needed to make. And they came up with an entire list of things that moved, that propelled Adlai Stevenson High School. This is when Rick DeFore was the principal at the school and then superintendent, to the forefront of the national movement in reform. There were common expectations, common grading expectations, common procedures, systematic ways to ensure that students who are not keeping pace would keep pace, systematic ways to ensure that students would not fail. What's the sense in keeping a student in a seat in a classroom for an 18-week period only for them to earn a D or even to earn an F, and have not spent that time wisely, when in fact you need to identify those students early on, you need to intervene early on. So I'm putting this in front of the board to carry that discussion forward. This could go in any number of directions, and I know it's sort of free form at this point, but board, I'll turn it over to you.
Let me start once. It seems to me, and I'm not sure who asked for this, but we sit up here every other week and we talk about a lot of stuff, we make a lot of decisions, but we never say, what does our staff need from us? What can we do to back them up, to support them, to make them better? What do they expect of us? have we ever asked them, what do you expect of the board? What can we do in the way of programs, you know, things that we can support? And so how can the board support efforts? You know, we need to know what our staff wants us to do. Mrs. Parker?
Well, I guess I would say that everything that our staff brings forward with the recommendation, that they're in the same place that we are, in the sense that we're all trying to move student achievement forward. But I think this is an interesting topic, and this is just one article. Part two is how the board can support efforts that these schools are making to boost achievement. I mean, a school board does that by looking at best practices, getting input from all the stakeholders, setting the vision, creating the goals, which is what we were just doing on an annual basis, and I would argue that we need to do this on more than an annual basis, and then putting policies in place and following staff recommendations, because hopefully we're all aligned in terms of purchases and programs coming in, and budgeting. I think that we could do more as a board in terms of directed study. It was really interesting. I mean, this is a great article. I think that we all, the five of us, are fascinated with education, and we all go off in our own direction sometime. And I think it would be great to have some recommendations about areas to study. We have such huge things coming up. We have the Common Core standards that have been adopted. You know, we need to know what that means. We need to have you know, a study session on that. We have WASC reports from the high schools that we haven't looked at. I think that this is, but the other reality is that we already spend so much time on our board duties. And part of me hesitates to say we should do more, but I think that we probably should do more.
Dr. Noel?
I think we make a mistake if we focus on, and I agree with what you say. I like the article. I like Marzano's work, and the research that underlies these. What do you do? How do you run a classroom? How do you teach? And that's utterly crucial. But it's only a piece of the puzzle. We talked about another piece, the organizational culture within which it takes place. Okay, I would single out of culture something that all the research tells us is important: expectations. That great teachers working in a culture of low expectations probably going to have a tougher time than they would if it was a supportive system and culture. So I think that well, oh yeah. Pardon me, I lost my train of thought. I started with the particular, and I worked up to the general. One way to change expectations, and I'm sure there are others, would be to have something like a 7th grade readiness exam. And this goes back to our debate about the GATE program. And my position was, in part then was, and continues to be, that the data show that we're not doing a good job at the elementary level in preparing, that the numbers of kids who are scoring advanced and proficient have been declining for 4 years in our elementary schools. So I say, all right, what's happening here? And I really don't know what's happening there. I think we need to know what's happening there. What can turn it around? What can we do to turn it around? Not a hell of a lot. We're here. We're there. They're doing the work. But if we set up expectations, and the idea that not that this is a gatekeeping exam, but that it is something that brings into focus whether the school is doing this job, whether the kids are ready. What are you going to do if they aren't? Nothing. They're not going to have a consequence, except that it's going to be public. It's going to be a number like the API, and we who were around before the API came in, you look back on that and say, my God, there was a cognitive transformation in public education. Now, everybody focuses on that particular statistic. We don't have a comparable statistic that would shape expectations for kids making that rough transition from elementary into junior high school. I think that's just one example. And
Good, thank you.
that's all I've got right now.
Mrs. Deacon?
Okay, that's an interesting concept. One of the issues we always have with testing is validating the tests, and we know writing good tests that are reliable are amazing feats in and of themselves. I have to say, reading this article, which I really enjoyed, was almost a cautionary tale for me, because it reminded me of all the research that's gone before and how things seem to circle back, and great ideas, 30 years ago are suddenly new great ideas today. The cautionary part to me comes in the form of realizing sometimes academic educators tend to chase down a new program that is not always the best program. And one of the things I really learned from teachers, talking to them, November through, in 2008, was that they feel sometimes we give them too many new programs to follow. And just when they're getting one dialed in, it's like, nope, here's a new one. And so what I took from this, and one of the things I think we can do, because ultimately I think supporting our teachers and evaluating them well and training them well is going to get us where we want to be, is that we make sure that we don't try to ask them to do too many things, that we ask them to do teaching well, and we support them that way. I'm kind of reminded of what I think once I heard called the grandmother theory, which is all this academic research, your grandmother could have told you what the results were going to be. So at any rate, what I take from this is the need to really focus on training our teachers, evaluating them well, making sure we have the best teachers in every job. And the other thing I think is parents, that we just really need to look at that parent piece, which is so key to student achievement. And if the board can find ways to support bringing parents in more, then I think we're doing a good job. So I would like to advocate for simplicity, focus, and staying on task when we can.
Yeah. Mrs. Parker?
Yeah, I have to say that after reading this article, I was really tempted to go back to the board focus goals and try to add something about personnel and, hiring, training, recruitment. But I restrained myself, knowing that we didn't have an executive director. Permanent, I should say.
Okay. Yes.
One thing to the conversation, and Brian and I have talked about this too, I also did quite a bit of reading over the summer, and one book actually that fascinated me was The Global Achievement Gap. And it's Tony Wagner, who also works at the Harvard School of Education. And one of his points was around effective instruction again, and the whole point of that less is more, and targeting, and don't start a lot of new things. But in that book, and then another book, Instructional Rounds, which our elementary group of principals are going to be working through this year as kind of their guide for their principals meetings, they use the medical model that you use for rounds when you have interns with you. And the key point in both of these is that we can say we have to have effective instruction. We're going to evaluate our teachers on that. We want all students engaged. And very often, there's not a clear definition of what that actually looks like. And that takes a lot of refinement, a lot of work together just around what is engagement and what is effective teaching. And if you show a video of teaching, an example of a classroom, and I've actually done this activity. Am I doing that? No? It's a phone somewhere. Okay. If you have a room full of educators and you show a video of a classroom teacher, invariably, every single time, if you ask them to just force rank, give that teacher a grade of A through F, you will get a spread every single time. And no matter what how effective by whatever means the teacher is teaching. So that's really the work that we're looking at, is working together, visiting schools together as we're walking through classrooms and having really deep conversations afterward about what are we seeing and what is effective instruction and how does that work with our evaluation tool and our supervision. So a lot of this is all coming together around the same theme that you're talking about.
Okay. Dr. Noel?
Thought of one more thing we might do. I too have been reading this summer, and there's a literature that suggests that our teachers in the classroom are constrained by ours, the boards, the administration's rules and bureaucracy. And that one of the things that this hypothesis is that one of the best things to do is to free them as much as possible, free their creativity, free their professionalism to do the job. Site-based management, I guess, was a step in that direction, and you know, that's something that's, I don't know how much one can do. The Ed Code imposes a great deal, but every time we go through a big stack of rules, retrospectively, I think about that. Oh, that's what we've been doing? Oh, my goodness. What's that look like and feel like in the classroom to the teacher? And if, you know, according to some of this literature, enough such constraints, teachers then kind of close in and do play it safe strategy rather than letting their creativity flow. And I don't think that'd be something that we might think about.
Okay, let's go to, back to the consent calendar, D3 and D4. Let's go to D3.
Mr. Heron, we do have public comment.
Oh, public comment on D3 and D4.
and
So we have D3. Well, let's find out why Dr. Noel, well, okay, let's hear the public comment on D3.
All right, Mr. Mason, do you want to speak on these two items together for a total of 3 minutes? Okay.
Good evening. In the past, I have spoke to the board concerning the approval of out-of-state travel and expenses after the fact. And in fact, the last time I spoke, one board member voted to not approve expenses, and another board member stated that this would be the last time that they voted to approve expenses or travel after the fact. We had cases, I think, in the last board meeting or the one before, where I think there were numerous teachers from Cleveland Elementary that went to the same out-of-state forum for training, and that was brought up as to maybe being too exorbitant or expensive, and maybe one or two teachers should have been sent and brought back to train the others at the school. As I'm looking at these two sheets, D3 and D4, I'm seeing almost $20,000 and an explanation that staff basically didn't know district policies, which I find that hard to understand. I see another one for almost $14,000 from the same school that the staff was unaware of a second board meeting in July, where the meetings are posted on your website, and I would hope that administrators are aware of your policies and when the board meetings occur. I have no problem with approving added expenses that one of these items shows, because I understand that you go to these conferences or you go to the training and there could be expenses you didn't understand, and then it takes a couple of months to get your credit cards and understand what they are. So I don't have that issue, but I'm baffled by the fact that you have 1, 2, 3 items here that are after the fact again, and it almost looks like they just don't understand the policies, the procedures, your board meetings. And again, I go back to, I heard one board member say they're not going to approve any more of these, and another one vote against approving these. Thank you.
Just for clarification, I don't think I was emphatic in what I said. I said I'm leaning in that direction.
I apologize, Mr. Herron.
Dr. Noel?
Well, the speaker raises a point that I was going to raise about after-the-fact approvals. I also wanted to ask about funding of the first item, 19,571, professional development block grant. Is that Tier 3 flexibility type money?
I believe it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, so that basically, then I may cross out fund, I may put general fund there, in effect.
You could. We wouldn't want to track it that way because
Well,
when it.
I know,
But you
but
can,
I'm-
yes.
I'm
You
me
can
and
assume
you're
that
you.
it's.
I'm a legislator and you're an administrator.
Yes.
So that basically is $19,000 from the general, from, in effect, the general fund. Money could be used for other purposes, for the International Baccalaureate team. Now, let me ask you this. Many of these programs are more or less voluntary. The International Baccalaureate program, does it require some of this for
Training?
continued certification?
Yes.
Of the program?
Yes.
Okay, that makes all the difference in the world to me. I still may vote against it because it's after the fact.
After the
but I-
fact.
Okay.
Do you want me to? I
No,
do
I want
need
to go on, okay, because I'm on a roll.
Okay, go on.
Avid Summer Institute, after the fact, same thing, professional development block grant, Tier 3. That is in effect money that can be used for any other purpose. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. I got my questions answered. Yeah, all right, fine.
I do want to address the after the fact because I had a brand-new principal said, I will come to the board meeting and, talk about this because I feel so badly that you're going to have to sit here and take this because I've told the principals, the board has made it very clear they're not going to be approving these, and that means it's going to come out of someone's pocket or something after the fact. In this particular case, we have a brand-new principal at this school who was on leave, and in the transition, I believe that in this case, although it has been a pattern, I understand, in this case, it truly was a switching of the guard, and the teachers didn't know about this, and they were taking on all of this and feeding it to staff at the office who may or may not have been the person who was normally doing it. It was really an outlier kind of situation in this case.